They hanged me for taking my father's ranch, but the ranchers saved her. Clara Martinez had not been back to her family ranch for nearly 10 years. The ranch, a wide stretch of golden fields and rolling hills, had been the heart of her childhood. She remembered running through the tall grass, chasing after her younger brother, and listening to her father's deep, steady voice telling stories about the land. The ranch had always been more than just a place. It was a part of her, tied to her family and her memories. Now, returning as the rightful heir after her father's passing, she felt both excitement and a heavy weight on her shoulders. As the old truck creaked along the dusty road leading to the ranch, Clara's heart pounded. She could see the familiar outlines of the barns, the fences, and the big oak tree where she and her brother had once carved their initials. Everything looked the same, yet everything felt different. The quiet was too quiet. The birds still sang, and the wind still whispered across the fields, but there was an unfamiliar tension in the air. Something had changed while she was away. Clara stepped out of the truck and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the nervous feeling creeping over her. Her father's old dog, Rusty, ran toward her, barking joyfully. Rusty had been old when she left, and now the dog seemed smaller, slower, but still full of loyalty. Clara knelt to hug Rusty, feeling a spark of comfort in the familiar presence. She told herself that everything would be fine. She had her father's papers, the will, and the legal proof that the ranch was hers. Nothing could take it away. Yet, almost immediately, she sensed that something was off. As she approached the main house, she noticed a few figures standing near the edge of the property, watching her. They were strangers, or at least people she didn't recognize. Their eyes were not welcoming. They looked cold, calculating. Clara's stomach tightened. She remembered the stories her father had told her about neighbors who were jealous of his success, people who thought they had a claim to parts of the land. She had never believed it could come to this, but now, seeing them watching her so intently, a chill ran down her spine. Clara went inside the house, her hands trembling slightly. The old wooden floors creaked beneath her feet, and the scent of her father's old books and tobacco lingered in the air. She walked from room to room, touching the furniture that had been part of her family for generations. It felt like stepping into a memory, yet she knew that memory was fragile. She had returned not just to relive the past, but to protect it, to keep the ranch alive as her father had dreamed. The next morning, Clara went into the town nearby to sort out legal documents and check on the boundaries of her land. At first, people greeted her politely, but she noticed whispers as she passed by the general store and the cafe. Some old friends smiled, but many avoided eye contact. A few corners of the town seemed to watch her movements closely. The sheriff, a man who had known her father well, offered her a polite nod but said little else. Clara tried not to let it worry her, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that the town itself had become a minefield of suspicion. Returning to the ranch that afternoon, Clara found a small group of men near the barn. They said they had come to help with the work, but their tone and the way they looked at her made her uneasy. She thanked them politely but kept her distance, knowing that appearances could be deceiving. One man, older and grayer than the others, lingered near the gate, watching her every move. Clara felt a knot in her stomach. She remembered her father's warnings about people who wanted what he had built. Now she realized those warnings were not just stories. They were real. Determined not to let fear rule her, Clara began organizing the ranch. She checked the fences, inspected the livestock, and started planning the harvest. The work was hard and her body ached in ways it hadn't for years. But as she walked across the fields, feeling the sun on her back and the wind in her hair, she also felt a quiet strength. This land was hers, and she would fight to protect it. Every corner of the ranch held a memory of her family, and she refused to let anyone take it away without a struggle. At night, Clara sat on the porch, looking out over the fields under the starry sky. The silence was deep, almost too deep, and she could not shake the feeling that eyes were always on her. The shadows of the hills seemed darker than they should, and every rustle of the trees made her jump. She tried to remember the happy memories, the laughter of her father, the songs they had sung together, but a part of her could not ignore the tension that had settled over the ranch like a cloud. Over the next few days, Clara noticed more signs that her inheritance was being challenged. Letters arrived, questioning the validity of her father's will. Local officials seemed unusually strict about paperwork, and some of the neighbors, who had once been friendly, began offering advice on what she should do with the property. Clara listened politely, but inside, she felt a growing anger. She had worked hard in her life, but she had never expected to have to defend her family's land against people who wanted to take it away unfairly. Despite the challenges, Clara did not back down. She met with the sheriff and showed him the legal documents. She hired a local lawyer to make sure her rights were protected. Each day brought new obstacles, but she faced them with determination. She worked from dawn until dusk, repairing fences, checking the animals, and learning everything she could about the business of running a ranch. Every small victory gave her confidence, but the looming threat of those who wanted to steal her inheritance was never far from her mind. One evening, as the sun was setting, Clara heard voices near the edge of the property. She walked cautiously toward them and found the same group of men who had been watching her before. They spoke in low tones, glancing at her as if daring her to come closer. Clara stood her ground, her heart pounding. She knew they were testing her, seeing if she would be intimidated. She did not speak at first, just looked at them steadily. Then, with a calm voice, she told them that this was her land, and she had the right to be there. The men muttered among themselves and eventually walked away, but Clara knew it was only a temporary reprieve. That night, Clara could hardly sleep. She sat on the porch, listening to the quiet, and thought about her father. He had faced challenges too, though perhaps not of this kind. She remembered how he had always said that the land was a part of the family, and it was worth protecting. Clara realized that she was now carrying that responsibility alone. Fear mixed with resolve, but she promised herself she would not let anyone take what her father had built. She would defend the ranch with all her strength, no matter what it cost. The days turned into weeks, and Clara began to settle into a rhythm. She worked hard, met the townspeople, and slowly started to earn respect. Some neighbors began to see her determination and offered help, but the tension never fully disappeared. She knew that there were people waiting for a mistake, a chance to claim the land for themselves. Each day brought a mixture of hope and anxiety. Clara understood that inheriting the ranch was only the beginning of a fight that would test her courage, her patience, and her heart. Even so, Clara found moments of peace. She walked the fields at dawn, watched the sunrise over the hills, and felt the wind on her face. The ranch was beautiful, alive, and full of potential. She remembered her father's voice in the early morning, guiding her, encouraging her. Clara felt a connection to him that went beyond memory. She felt his presence in the land itself. It was this connection that gave her strength to face the coming days, knowing that she was not alone, even in the midst of danger and betrayal. By the end of that first month, Clara had begun to transform the ranch in her image while honoring her father's legacy. She repaired the old barn, tended to the livestock, and marked the boundaries clearly. Each task was a reminder of why she had returned: to protect her family's home, to preserve its history, and to prove that she was capable of leading. But even as she worked, Clara could not shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning, a test not only of her rights, but of her courage, intelligence, and resilience. Clara Martinez had returned to the ranch as an heir, but she would have to stay as a warrior to protect it. And in her heart, she knew that this was only the first chapter of a story that would test everything she had learned from her father and perhaps reveal strengths she had never known she possessed. Clara Martinez woke up one morning to a strange silence that felt heavier than usual. The wind was still, and even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. She poured herself a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch, hoping the quiet would be peaceful. Instead, she noticed footprints near the barn she didn't recognize. They were fresh, leading toward the main house, and her stomach sank. The realization hit her. Someone had been on her property during the night. Her hands tightened around the mug as she stared at the ground, trying to stay calm. The ranch she loved so much was already under threat, and she was not even fully settled yet. Clara decided to investigate. She followed the tracks across the field, careful not to disturb anything, and discovered that someone had tampered with the barn door. The lock was broken, and the latch hung loose. She swallowed hard. Nothing was missing, thankfully, but the message was clear. Someone wanted to intimidate her. Fear prickled her nerves, but Clara refused to show it. She was not a girl anymore. She was the owner now, and she had to protect her father's legacy. She carefully fixed the latch and reinforced the door, making a mental note to install extra security later. The next day, Clara rode into town to meet with the lawyer handling her father's will. As she drove, she noticed a few familiar faces following her from a distance, staying just out of reach. Clara's heart raced, but she tried to act normal. At the lawyer's office, she was met with a pile of paperwork and questions about the ranch, boundaries, and previous owners. The lawyer explained that there were a few people trying to challenge her inheritance. Some claimed that her father had promised the ranch to them. Others said the will was invalid. Clara listened quietly, her jaw tight. She had expected legal disputes, but seeing it on paper made it real. After the meeting, Clara stopped at the general store to gather supplies. She had hoped for a friendly smile or encouraging word from the townspeople. Some did greet her politely, but others avoided her completely. Whispers followed her as she moved through the aisles. A man standing near the counter lowered his voice as she approached, speaking to someone else, clearly about her. Clara clenched her fists, feeling anger rise in her chest. How could people be so quick to doubt her? She reminded herself to remain calm. Showing fear would only make them bolder. Returning to the ranch in the late afternoon, Clara found the same men she had seen weeks ago near the edge of her property. They didn't approach this time, but they lingered, watching her work from a distance. She ignored them, continuing her chores. She fed the animals, repaired fences, and inspected the crops. But every rustle of the trees and every shadow made her jump. The ranch, once a place of comfort, now carried a constant tension. Clara realized she had underestimated how much the outside world had changed while she was away. People who once seemed kind could now be dangerous, and she had to be ready for anything. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Clara was walking back from the far side of the ranch when she heard a voice calling her name. She froze, straining her ears. Another voice joined it, low and mocking, coming from the trees. Clara's heart pounded. Someone was taunting her, testing her courage. She considered running back to the house, but she stopped herself. If she ran, they would see her fear, and that could embolden them further. Instead, she turned slowly toward the sound, standing tall. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her stomach. The voices laughed. low and unpleasant. Two men stepped out from behind a group of trees, their expressions filled with challenge. "You don't belong here," one said. "This land should have gone to people who can handle it." Clara's eyes narrowed. "This is my land," she replied firmly. "It belonged to my father, and now it belongs to me. I will not leave." The men stared at her for a moment, surprised by her confidence, then muttered among themselves and disappeared back into the shadows. Clara exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. She had faced them, and for now, she was safe. But the encounter made one thing clear: she could no longer work alone. The following days were a mix of hard work and constant vigilance. Clara spent hours checking fences, making sure gates were locked, and keeping an eye out for strangers. She began documenting everything: footprints, broken locks, and even small incidents of intimidation. She knew she might need evidence if the threats escalated. Despite the fear and stress, she refused to let it stop her from maintaining the ranch. Every morning she woke before sunrise, tending to the animals and fields. Each night she walked the property line, listening to the wind and counting the fences, reassuring herself that she was not powerless. Clara also reached out to neighbors she trusted, quietly asking about the newcomers who had been watching her. Some offered helpful advice, warning her about people who had tried similar tactics in the past. Others seemed hesitant, afraid to speak too openly. Clara understood their fear but wished for more support. The ranch was her father's dream, and it was up to her to defend it. Every conversation, every look from the town reminded her that she had to be strong, not just for herself, but for the memory of her family. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the far pasture, Clara heard the sound of horses approaching. She looked up and saw a man she recognized from the town, Miguel, a local rancher who had known her father. He had always been kind and respected by everyone in the community. Miguel rode closer, nodding at her. "I heard you might need some help," he said simply. Clara felt a surge of relief. She had been handling everything on her own, but knowing someone trustworthy was nearby made a difference. She accepted his offer cautiously, still unsure if it would be enough to protect the ranch. Miguel stayed for several days, helping Clara reinforce the fences, check the animals, and patrol the property at night. His presence brought a sense of safety she had not felt since arriving. The nights were still tense, and the shadows still seemed alive, but with Miguel nearby, Clara felt less alone. They spoke often about her father, about the history of the ranch, and about the land itself. Miguel shared stories of how her father had fought to maintain the property, emphasizing the importance of standing firm. Clara listened carefully, learning from his experience and finding strength in their shared determination. Despite Miguel's help, the threats continued. Strange noises at night, more footprints near the barn, and cryptic messages left on the fence reminded Clara that danger was never far. She kept a detailed journal, noting every incident. Each entry strengthened her resolve. She understood that this fight was not only about owning the land, but about proving that she could protect it. The ranch was more than a piece of property. It was her father's legacy and a part of her own identity. Losing it would mean losing a connection she could never replace. Clara's determination inspired some neighbors who had been hesitant. Slowly, people began offering small gestures of support, lending tools, helping with repairs, or simply checking in to see that she was safe. While many still whispered and watched from a distance, the small signs of solidarity gave Clara hope. She realized that standing firm, showing courage, and working hard could influence others. She was learning not just to manage the ranch, but also to navigate the complicated network of people around her. One evening, as Clara sat on the porch with Miguel watching the sunset, she reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The ranch felt alive again, but it was also fragile, constantly under threat. She realized that the real danger came not just from strangers, but from the uncertainty of people's intentions, the whispers, and the fear that someone could strike at any moment. Clara clenched her hands in determination. She would not give in. She would not allow fear to dominate her life or her inheritance. That night, as the stars blanketed the sky, Clara prepared herself for the coming days. She reviewed her plans, checked the fences one more time, and ensured that Miguel had everything he needed for the night patrol. Though tired, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever. Clara knew that the threats were escalating, and it was only a matter of time before the situation reached a critical point. But she also knew that she had courage, skill, and allies who would help her face whatever came next. Clara Martinez had come back to claim her father's ranch, but she now understood that claiming it was only the beginning. The real test was in defending it, facing danger head-on, and proving that her resolve was stronger than anyone's threats. Each day, each challenge, each fearful encounter was shaping her into someone stronger, braver, and more determined. And as she looked out over the fields, she promised herself that she would not only survive, but she would thrive and honor her father's legacy no matter the cost. The days at the ranch had grown longer, and the tension in the air seemed thicker than ever. Clara Martinez had worked tirelessly, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and patrolling the property. Yet, no matter how much she prepared, a quiet fear lingered. She knew that the men who had been watching her were growing bolder. Every shadow in the trees, every rustle in the bushes, made her heart race. She could no longer ignore the possibility that they might act directly against her. One afternoon, Clara was inspecting the far pasture when she noticed unusual tracks in the dirt. They were larger than a man's usual boot, pressed deeply into the soil, and they led toward the main barn. Her stomach tightened. She had seen footprints before, but these were heavier, more deliberate. Someone was approaching the ranch, and it was clear they were not coming to visit. Clara's mind raced with possibilities. Could she handle an actual confrontation? She had been preparing for months, but the thought of being face-to-face with her father's adversaries made her palms sweat. She ran back to the house, grabbing her old rifle from the safe, even though she hoped she would not have to use it. Rusty, the loyal dog, followed her closely, growling low in his throat. Clara felt a strange mix of fear and resolve. She could not let anyone take the ranch, not now, not ever. She moved quietly through the house, checking that all doors and windows were secure. Every creak of the old floorboards seemed louder than usual, echoing her rising tension. As dusk approached, Clara heard voices in the distance. Low, menacing, and mocking, they carried across the fields. Her heart pounded as she realized that the men who had been threatening her had returned, and they had come in larger numbers. They did not call her by name, but their tone was unmistakable. They were there to intimidate her. Clara stood her ground, gripping the rifle, trying to steady her breathing. The wind carried the smell of dust and smoke, and she felt as though the entire ranch was holding its breath with her. Suddenly, a man appeared from behind the trees, moving quickly and purposefully. There were 5 of them this time, all dressed in dark clothes, faces partially covered. One of them, the apparent leader, stepped forward and spoke. "You should leave the ranch, girl," he said. "It isn't yours." Clara's jaw tightened. She could hear the anger in his voice, but also the arrogance of someone who believed he could take what he wanted. She raised her chin and replied firmly, "It belongs to me." My father left it to me, and I will not leave." The man laughed harshly. "We'll see about that," he said. In a sudden movement, they tried to rush her, surrounding her from all sides. Clara fired a warning shot into the air. Rusty barked loudly, running between her and the men, trying to keep them at a distance. Clara's hands shook, but she refused to give in. The men hesitated, surprised by her courage and determination. They muttered among themselves, then pulled back slightly, circling her like predators. Clara knew that this confrontation could turn dangerous at any moment. Hours seemed to stretch as the sun set and shadows lengthened across the ranch. Clara remained alert, moving slowly to keep herself protected. The men tried to intimidate her with threats and gestures, but she stood her ground, refusing to show fear. At one point, they attempted to grab her, but she dodged skillfully, using the landscape to her advantage. The barn, the fences, and the uneven ground gave her room to maneuver. Clara realized that her months of preparation, repairing the land and learning its every corner, were helping her now. She knew the ranch better than anyone, and it gave her an edge over her aggressors. As night fell, the men became more reckless. They cornered her near the old oak tree at the edge of the field, where she had once carved her initials with her brother. Clara's heart raced, and she knew she had only moments to act. The leader advanced, trying to grab her, and she struggled, pushing him back. In the chaos, her rifle fell from her hands. Rusty barked fiercely, snapping at the men, but it was clear she was outnumbered. Clara's mind raced, looking for a way out. She could not afford to be captured or hurt. The ranch depended on her, and she refused to let it fall into the wrong hands. Suddenly, one of the men made a cruel move. They tried to hang her from the large branch of the oak tree, intending to scare her into giving up. Clara struggled with all her strength, fighting against the ropes, her fingers raw and bleeding. The rough bark scratched her arms, and she could feel herself growing weaker with each passing second. Her mind raced as she tried to think of a way to escape. Panic threatened to overtake her, but she forced herself to breathe deeply, recalling every lesson her father had taught her about courage and resilience. At that moment, a whistle sounded in the distance. Clara froze, and the men paused, looking around nervously. She heard the familiar sound of hooves pounding the earth. Miguel, the rancher who had been helping her, rode toward the scene with determination in his eyes. He carried a long rope and a lantern, and he shouted at the men to stay back. The attackers hesitated, unsure if they should continue or flee. Clara felt a surge of relief, knowing help had arrived just in time. Miguel rode quickly, throwing the rope with skill and precision. He managed to knock the leader off balance, giving Clara the opportunity to free herself. She scrambled from the ropes, her body aching, and ran toward Miguel for support. Rusty barked happily, circling around them both. The men, realizing they were outmatched now, retreated into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. Clara fell to her knees, exhausted and trembling, but alive. She had survived the attack thanks to Miguel's timely intervention. After the confrontation, Miguel helped Clara back to the house. She was shaken, her arms and legs sore from the struggle, but her spirit remained unbroken. They locked all doors and windows, double-checking the ranch for any signs that the men might return. Clara realized how vulnerable she had been, and how important it was to have allies she could trust. Miguel stayed with her through the night, keeping watch and offering comfort. His presence reminded her that courage was not just about standing alone, but also about accepting help when it was needed. The next morning, Clara walked through the ranch, inspecting the areas where the confrontation had taken place. She noticed the disturbed soil, the broken branches, and the flattened grass, reminders of the danger she had faced. Yet, instead of feeling defeated, She felt stronger. The attack had been terrifying, but it had also shown her how capable she could be under pressure. She was more determined than ever to protect the ranch, to honor her father's memory, and to ensure that no one could ever intimidate her into giving up what was rightfully hers. Clara also realized the importance of preparing for future threats. She and Miguel began setting up stronger fences, reinforced locks, and early warning systems around the property. They worked tirelessly to create a ranch that could withstand not just natural challenges, but human threats as well. Each improvement made Clara feel more confident and more in control. She knew that she could not stop the danger completely, but she could reduce the risk and protect herself and her land more effectively. Over the following days, Clara focused on rebuilding her strength and keeping the ranch in order. She attended to the animals, repaired damaged fences, and carefully monitored the surrounding areas. The men had left, but their presence lingered in her mind. Clara understood that this was only the beginning of a larger struggle. She would have to remain vigilant, courageous, and resourceful to ensure the safety of the ranch. But the attack had also revealed something crucial. She was stronger than she had ever realized. Clara's bond with Miguel grew stronger during this period. They shared strategies, discussed possible threats, and supported each other through the uncertainty. Miguel taught her how to handle confrontations calmly, how to observe the land for signs of danger, and how to remain composed even under pressure. Clara listened carefully, learning from his experience and gaining confidence. She realized that facing danger was not just about physical strength, but also about intelligence, preparation, and a steady heart. As the nights grew darker and the air cooler, Clara often sat on the porch reflecting on the events. She thought about her father and the legacy he had left behind. The ranch was more than just land. It was a symbol of resilience, courage, and hard work. Clara knew that she had to live up to that legacy. The confrontation with the men had been frightening, but it had also proven that she could face danger and survive. She promised herself that she would continue to protect the ranch, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Clara Martinez had survived her first real test as the owner of her father's ranch. The attackers had tried to intimidate her, to take what was rightfully hers, but they had failed. With courage, determination, and the support of Miguel, she had overcome a moment that could have been devastating. Yet, she knew that the danger was far from over. The ranch would continue to face threats, and Clara would need to remain vigilant, prepared, and strong. But one thing was certain. She would never give up, and she would never let fear control her life or her inheritance. The morning after the confrontation, Clara Martinez awoke with a heavy sense of unease. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind. The men, their faces twisted with cruelty, the ropes that had almost captured her, and the fear that had nearly paralyzed her. Though she had survived, she knew deep down that the threat was far from over. The ranch, which had been her sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield. Clara rose quietly, careful not to wake Rusty, who lay curled at the foot of her bed. She dressed quickly and moved toward the window, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. Miguel had been awake for hours already, tending to the horses and reinforcing the fences. Clara could see him from her window, working steadily despite the early hour. She admired his dedication and his calm courage, qualities that seemed to radiate even in the face of uncertainty. She knew that without him, she might have been captured the night before. The thought made her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with gratitude. Miguel had become more than a helper. He had become a guardian, a mentor, and a steady presence in the storm of her life. After breakfast, they set out to inspect the property again. Clara walked alongside Miguel, carefully noting every area where the men could have hidden or set traps. The attack had been close, too close, and she was determined not to let it happen again. Miguel guided her as they checked the fences, gates, and even the trees surrounding the ranch. "Knowledge of the land is power," he reminded her. "If you know every corner, every shadow, you can predict danger before it reaches you." Clara nodded, realizing that her father had taught her similar lessons, though now the stakes were higher than ever. As they moved toward the barn, Clara noticed something unusual: a piece of paper pinned to the wooden door with a small rock. She picked it up carefully, her heart pounding. Written in bold letters were the words, "This is only the beginning. Leave now, or face the consequences." Her stomach twisted, but she refused to let the note intimidate her. Instead, she showed it to Miguel, who frowned but remained calm. "They're trying to scare you," he said. "But notice, they didn't touch the livestock or the property this time. They want a reaction. Fear is their weapon, not force." Clara's resolve strengthened. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it. Ah. That afternoon, Clara decided to focus on the livestock, checking every animal to make sure none had been harmed during the night. Rusty stayed close, his ears alert to every sound. Miguel helped her, and together they moved through the fields methodically, feeding the horses, inspecting the cows, and repairing minor damage to fences. The work was exhausting, but it also gave Clara a sense of purpose. Every action she took to protect the ranch was a small victory, a step toward reclaiming control over a situation that had threatened to overwhelm her. Even as they worked, Clara could feel eyes watching from the edges of the property. She had grown accustomed to the shadows and the distant movements, but now every noise made her jump. Miguel remained by her side, calm and alert, a reassuring presence in the tense environment. They spoke little, but their silence was filled with understanding. Both knew that the men could return at any time, and both were prepared for what might come. Clara felt a mix of fear and determination, but with Miguel's guidance, she began to trust her instincts and the land she knew so well. That evening, Clara and Miguel decided to set a trap of their own. They placed lanterns strategically around the property, making it appear as though the ranch was more fortified than it was. Miguel showed Clara how to use the shadows to their advantage, creating blind spots and escape routes in case the men returned. Clara absorbed every instruction, practicing quickly and efficiently. The ranch, once just her home, was becoming a fortress in her mind, a place where courage and planning could overcome intimidation. As night fell, a low wind rustled the trees, and the shadows grew longer. Clara sat quietly near the porch, while Miguel patrolled the edges with a lantern. The ranch felt alive with tension, every creak of the barn and whistle of the wind magnified. Clara's thoughts drifted to her father, remembering how he had walked these same fields with confidence and purpose. She imagined his voice in her ear, encouraging her to stand tall and protect what was hers. This memory steeled her nerves, giving her courage she hadn't known she possessed. Suddenly, from the darkness, she heard a faint snap, a branch breaking under a weight. Her heart leapt into her throat. Miguel immediately signaled for her to stay calm and crouched low, lantern in hand. From the shadows emerged 3 men, the same who had tried to capture her before, their faces angry and determined. This time they moved with the intent to harm, not just intimidate. Clara gripped her rifle tightly, prepared to defend herself. The moment of truth had arrived. One of the men lunged toward her, but Miguel acted quickly. He intercepted the attack, swinging the rope he carried with precision, knocking the man off balance. Rusty barked and charged, forcing another attacker to stumble backward. Clara, her body tense with adrenaline, ran to the oak tree and grabbed the ropes that had been used against her before. Using the skills Miguel had taught her, she improvised a barrier, creating a tripline that caused the third man to stumble. The attackers were caught off guard by their coordination and Clara's quick thinking. In the chaos, Clara and Miguel managed to drive the men back. They did not run far. They disappeared into the shadows, muttering threats as they fled. But the message was clear. Clara was not defenseless. She had faced the danger head-on, and with Miguel's guidance she had survived. The relief that washed over her was overwhelming, yet she also knew that this was only one battle in a larger war. The men would likely return, and Clara had to be ready for whatever came next. After the attackers fled, Clara and Miguel checked the ranch carefully, ensuring that nothing had been damaged or stolen. They reinforced the fences, secured the doors, and made plans to remain vigilant throughout the night. Clara's hands trembled from the adrenaline, but she refused to let fear take hold. She had survived an encounter that could have ended her life, and she had done so with courage, intelligence, and the support of a trusted ally. The night passed slowly, but Clara remained alert. Every sound, from the rustling of leaves to the distant howl of a coyote, made her heart race. Yet, she also felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced danger and lived to see another day. Her bond with Miguel had strengthened, and together they had shown that careful planning, courage, and determination could overcome even the most threatening situations. In the days that followed, Clara focused on recovery and preparation. She inspected the ranch, strengthened fences, and ensured that all animals were safe. Miguel taught her more about handling confrontations, predicting danger, and remaining calm under pressure. Clara absorbed every lesson, realizing that survival required both courage and intelligence. She also began documenting every incident, creating a record of threats that could be used for legal protection if needed. Clara's confidence grew as she worked alongside Miguel. The ranch, once a place of fear and uncertainty, was becoming a symbol of resilience and determination. She understood that the struggle for her inheritance was not only about land, but about proving her strength, courage, and ability to protect what was hers. Every obstacle, every threat, and every shadow she faced made her stronger and more capable. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Clara stood at the edge of the pasture, looking out across the ranch. The wind carried the scent of grass and earth, familiar and comforting. She felt a sense of pride in what she had accomplished and a renewed determination to protect her father's legacy. The men who had threatened her might return, but Clara knew she was no longer the frightened girl who had first arrived at the ranch. She was a woman who had faced danger, survived, and grown stronger because of it. Clara Martinez had endured an attack that could have ended her life, but with courage, intelligence, and Miguel's help, she had not only survived but gained strength. The ranch was still hers. Her father's dream was intact, and she had proven to herself that she could face the worst and come out alive. Yet, she knew the journey was not over. Danger could return at any time, but Clara was ready. She would protect her ranch, her family's legacy, and her own courage with everything she had. The sun rose over the ranch, casting a warm, golden light across the fields. Clara Martinez stood on the porch, looking out at the land she had fought so hard to protect. The past weeks had tested her courage, her strength, and her determination, but she had survived every challenge. The attacks, the threats, and the fear had all been real, but now they were behind her. Or at least, that was what she hoped. Today, she felt a quiet sense of peace, a moment to breathe and reflect on everything she had accomplished. Clara knew the work was far from over. Though the men had fled, the town still held whispers, doubts, and people who questioned her right to the ranch. She could feel the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders once again. But this time it was not fear she felt, it was determination. She had proven, first to herself and then to anyone who might doubt her, that she was capable of protecting her father's legacy. With Miguel at her side, she felt prepared to face whatever challenges remained. They spent the morning inspecting the ranch together. Every fence, gate, and corner was carefully checked. The livestock were healthy, the barns secured, and the fields well tended. Miguel taught Clara how to notice the smallest signs of intrusion: footprints, broken branches, or disturbed soil. Each observation made her feel more confident and capable. She realized that running a ranch was not only about physical work, but also about attention, patience, and understanding the land like a living, breathing partner. Clara also reached out to the townspeople more openly. She met with neighbors, some of whom had been wary or distant during her first weeks back. She explained her intentions clearly, showing them that she was not only capable of managing the ranch, but also respectful of the community. Some were skeptical at first, but many began to offer support, whether it was helping with supplies, giving advice, or simply watching the ranch with her. Slowly, Clara felt the walls of distrust beginning to soften. She understood that courage alone was not enough. Building trust and respect was equally important. One afternoon, as she repaired a section of the barn roof, Clara heard a familiar voice calling from the field. It was one of the neighbors, an older woman who had once been close to her father. She walked over cautiously, holding a basket of food. "I see how hard you're working," she said gently. "Your father would be proud. Don't let anyone tell you this land isn't yours." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth she had not felt in weeks. These small gestures reminded her that she was not alone, that the community she had feared might turn against her could also be a source of strength. Clara and Miguel continued to patrol the ranch daily, reinforcing fences, checking livestock, and observing the land. They had set up small signs, subtle traps, and early warning systems to detect any intrusion. The ranch was no longer just a home. It was a fortress of safety, knowledge, and resilience. Each successful day of work, each small victory over fear, strengthened Clara's confidence. She realized that the danger, though still present in the shadows, had lost much of its power over her. One evening, Miguel and Clara sat by the barn after a long day of work. The sun was low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They spoke about the past weeks, the threats, the attacks, and the fear, and about how far Clara had come. "You've grown stronger than I expected," Miguel said, smiling. "Your father would be proud of the woman you've become." Clara felt a surge of gratitude. She had not only survived, but she had learned, grown, and proven her courage. The ranch was safe, and she was ready to protect it at any cost. As the days passed, Clara also began to invest in the future of the ranch. She repaired old fences, planted new crops, and improved the barns. She learned how to manage livestock more efficiently and how to anticipate the needs of the land. The ranch, which had once felt fragile and vulnerable, was becoming a thriving, self-sustaining home. Each improvement, each act of care, was a tribute to her father and a statement to anyone who had doubted her. This ranch was hers, and she was its guardian. Despite her progress, Clara knew she could not let her guard down completely. She remained vigilant, watching for signs of intrusion and maintaining the security measures she and Miguel had put in place. The experience had taught her that threats could arise from unexpected places, and preparation was key. She also knew that courage and intelligence were equally important. Physical strength alone would not be enough to protect the ranch from those who would challenge her. One morning, Clara received a visit from the sheriff. who had known her father well. He arrived quietly, tipping his hat in greeting. "I heard what happened," he said, his voice calm but serious. "You've done well to protect the ranch. But remember, vigilance is key. You've shown courage, but people can be persistent." Clara nodded, grateful for his advice and support. The sheriff's presence reminded her that she was not alone, that there were people in the town who valued justice and fairness. Clara also began documenting her experiences more formally. She wrote down every incident, every threat, and every act of courage she had displayed. This record was not only for legal protection, but also as a personal reminder of her strength and resilience. Each entry reinforced her confidence, reminding her that she had faced danger and survived, and that she had done so with integrity and courage. Over time, Clara's reputation in the town began to change. People who had once whispered doubts now nodded respectfully when they saw her. Some sought her advice on ranching matters, while others offered help without hesitation. Clara realized that her courage and determination had earned her respect, and that fear had been replaced by trust. She had proven that she was capable of managing not only the ranch, but also the challenges that came with it. One afternoon, Clara stood on the hill overlooking the ranch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The land stretched out before her, golden and peaceful, with Rusty lying nearby and Miguel tending to the horses. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The ranch was safe, her father's legacy was secure, and she had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever. The struggles of the past weeks, though difficult, had shaped her into a guardian worthy of the land she loved. Clara knew that life on the ranch would always bring challenges, but she no longer feared them. She had learned how to face danger with courage, how to protect what was hers, and how to earn respect through integrity and determination. The land was more than a property. It was a living symbol of her family's history, her father's dreams, and her own strength. She understood that protecting it was not only a duty, but a privilege. As the first stars appeared in the evening sky, Clara felt a sense of calm she had not known since returning to the ranch. The fear that had haunted her for weeks had been replaced by confidence, resilience, and hope. She knew that the men who had threatened her might return someday, but she was ready. She was no longer the young girl who had arrived at the ranch uncertain and afraid. She was a woman who had faced danger, survived, and emerged stronger because of it. In the days that followed, Clara continued her work with renewed energy. She expanded the ranch, improved the barns, and ensured the livestock were healthy and secure. She continued to build relationships with the town, earning trust and respect. Every task, every small act of care, was a step toward solidifying her claim and protecting her father's legacy. Clara understood that this was not only about survival. It was about thriving, growing, and honoring the land that had shaped her life. Clara Martinez had returned to the ranch as an heir, but she remained as its protector, its guardian, and its rightful owner. She had faced fear, confrontation, and threats that could have overwhelmed her. Yet, through courage, intelligence, and the support of trusted allies like Miguel, she had secured her father's legacy and earned the respect of the town. The ranch was safe, thriving, and filled with promise for the future. Clara knew that the journey had been difficult, but every struggle had prepared her for the life she now embraced with confidence and determination. At last, Clara stood at the edge of the field, watching the sun rise over the hills. The wind carried the scent of fresh grass and soil, a reminder of the land she had fought so hard to protect. Rusty barked happily, running across the pasture while Miguel checked the fences nearby. Clara felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had survived threats that could have destroyed her, protected the ranch she loved, and honored her father's memory. She knew that the future held challenges, but she was ready to meet them with courage, resilience, and pride. The ranch, once threatened by men who sought to intimidate and take it away, now stood as a testament to Clara's determination and bravery. Her father's legacy lived on through her actions, her dedication, and her unwavering courage. Clara understood that she had not only claimed a piece of land, but also proved her own strength, resilience, and ability to face the most difficult challenges with grace and determination. And so, Clara Martinez, the rightful owner of the ranch, continued her life with purpose, courage, and hope. She had faced danger, survived, and triumphed. A land that had been her father's dream was now her own, safe, secure, and thriving under her watchful eyes. The ranch was no longer just a place, it was a symbol of her strength, her perseverance, and the legacy of a family that had fought to protect what was theirs.